the same day, usually in the afternoon after the lecture, because there is one more section after y'all. I want to first start out by congratulating you on completing your first speech. So we've got informative speeches in by 11:59 p.m. on yesterday, and still some were dragging in a little bit after the deadline. So you'll start seeing grades populated for the informative speech on today and tomorrow. We want to make certain that you understood that you were to submit your full sentence outline template to the assignment portal that was demarked for informative speaking. And then in the discussion section is where you were to upload your video. If you want to do the discount double check, make sure that your video is viewable and playable before about 2 o'clock today, please do, because that's when the official batch grading will start. You can also go into that discussion section and look at some of your classmates' videos, watch their speeches. That's why it's a discussion section that's public for your class only, so your classmates will be able to go in and be your public essentially. And you're welcome to put some comments, all positive, of course, about the cool things that you've learned from your classmates' speeches. So this one, remember, was 3 to 5 minutes. You used our full sentence outline template. You recorded your video and uploaded it. Your submission procedure is going to be exactly the same for our next speeches. The only thing that will really vary is the time range that you'll have for that speech. For example, our next speech that's coming up is centered in chapter 25 of our textbook, and it's called a special occasion speech. And that's where you'll get to choose to do a toast to someone, a eulogy, a tribute, a speech of celebration, a speech that you introduce oneself. And those speeches will be very, very short because they are under the premise that we're in some sort of ceremony or some larger event. So we have to kind of be brief. You'll use the exact same full sentence outline template, same energy of typing every single word you plan on saying. However, for that speech, you will only have 90 seconds to 2 minutes to express yourself in speech form. So 90 seconds is your minimum, meaning that your speech shouldn't be under a minute and a half. And your maximum is 2 minutes, meaning the speech should not run over that time. All right, so we don't want a special occasion speech that runs 4 minutes or 5 minutes or in that window. Every speech that we have in this class carries with it its own separated out time range. And so this one coming up is 90 seconds to 2 minutes. We'll go over it in class, for all of the information that you need to know about it, reading through chapter 25 later on this week, but we just want to make sure to preview that's the next major assignment that's coming up speech-wise. We're also in preparation for your midterm exam, which sounds silly, but understand this is only a 3-week course. So that means that lots of our book information and our supplemental materials that are in the files section will be helpful to you. We will also discuss in our live Webex that talks about our reviewing for the midterm exam, exactly which chapters will be seen therein. So I'm just opening up your activity schedule really quickly, making certain that you understand that you have a handout for the midterm exam and also a lecture that covers the midterm exam review that has been previously recorded. Let me go ahead and share the screen really quickly. So you can see our dates that are here. So your midterm examination is on tomorrow. So it's on this coming Wednesday. It will consist of 25 multiple choice questions that will feel like one of the quizzes that you've taken already. So you'll take one today. You took one before on this previous Friday, that you'll see multiple choice questions that will come directly from our lectures, our textbooks, and our notes. We want to make certain that we know exactly what's going to be on there. So I'm giving you the guns because this concerns you. You'll also get an announcement towards the value of the midterm examination. And remember, you have that previously recorded lecture that goes over the same handout that's in the files section that helps us review for the midterm exam. And we'll bot by there in a second. For your midterm examination, here are the guns. Please study your crash course PowerPoint. Please study your crash course PowerPoint. Please study the full sentence outline, including the outline content guide and the template itself. So far, the crash course PowerPoint and anything that helps you understand the full sentence outlining process, which are supplements in our file section that are our speech content guide and the blank template itself can be helpful to you. Also, there's an outlining
Can you
video.
repeat that? I didn't hear you.
Okay, your crash course PowerPoint and the supplemental materials that are for outlining, which are in the files section. And one of them is the content guide, CONTENT, content guide. And the second is the template itself. So the full sentence outline template that's blank. You're welcome to study that. And then in the announcement section, we have a video that's previously recorded that's called the outlining video that walks through every step of the creation of the full sentence outline template. Is that helpful or you need again?
No, I got it. Thank you.
All right, fantastic. So your crash course PowerPoint, everything that has to do with outlining. And then what we're going to discuss very briefly today in the concept of reducing speech anxiety, listening, and ethics. And those are shared in chapters 3, 4, and 5 of your textbook. Remember, that is located in your first day inclusive access tab. So, chapters 3, 4, and 5 discuss reducing anxiety, listening, and a little bit about ethics. And that will be the crux of your midterm examination, which will be a 25-item exam, multiple choice, and you'll have until 11:59 p.m. at the end of tomorrow, the 25th, in order to study and to launch the exam. Questions or comments about the exam, its date, its format, anything I can help with?
Yeah, one question about the today's quiz. It's not available right now.
Oh, it's not?
No.
Apologies. Okay. Well, let's take the quickest break because it absolutely should have already matriculated and been ready. All right, give me just 1 second. Let me make sure of what's happening. Apologies for that. They should all be, as soon as it's midnight, ready to go. Oh, I see. The machine is recorded in AM instead of the PM the night before. Alrighty. Apologies, and we'll even get a quick extension. Alrighty, so thank you so much for that information. Quiz 2 is live and launchable now. You can check if you'd like to. So it should be okay, and it's been extended out until now. You have until 4 in the morning to take it. So if anybody was going to be a late bird and taking it then you're welcome. So you've got some hours restored for the time that it was closed overnight. Thank you so much for that information, and it is now corrected, or it should be. So you can do discount double check, make sure that it is, and let me know. Other questions or comments? Anyone have anything?
I
Thank
have,
you. Yeah, it's fixed now. It's available.
Okay, fantastic. Question?
yes, is this open book, the midterm?
Yes, you may use any book, any notes, anything that you like.
And for the first two class sessions that we have, will we need to review is it vital to review those for the midterm, or is what you listed exactly what we need to do well?
What I listed is exactly what you need to do well, and those things are lectured in those videos. So if you already watched the videos or get the lecture, since we're in such a short time crunch, I doubt that you would, unless you're just really that type of learner, need to watch them over again. You probably have taken good notes and internalized that. But I think you would be passable and survivable of just reading the materials over again that have already been lectured, that's been listed this morning.
Okay, and then I'm sorry, I'm that person that has a million questions, obviously.
Fine.
So And will there be any repeat questions from the quizzes that we're having thus far?
It will be the same sentiment. You won't see the exact same question with the same responses. So it's not like you're going to notice this was number 3 from quiz 1 that's going to be there, but it'll be, of course, the very similar information or a similar unit. So let's say that in quiz 1 you were asked something about the introduction. Then in the midterm exam, you might be asked a very similar question about the conclusion. So it'll just convert it to a different part of the outline.
Okay, and then can you confirm there was 2 questions that I got wrong, and, are you comfortable confirming that since that's or would you prefer
Sure,
not to?
that's fine. Lots of students had questions with the type of numbers, that response, and I got lots of emails about that. So the question was asking which character, and that's an important word for us to focus on, which character indicates supporting materials on the full sentence outline. And the correct answer is Arabic numerals, which was expressed on our second classes lecture and also in our outlining video. Regular numbers are a mathematical quantification category. So when we say regular numbers, we may think that they just look like numbers on a clock, but just as Roman numerals have a place value to them, and that's why they're called, from a geography or region portion, Roman numerals, Arabic numerals carry with them their own name as well. So they're not regular numbers. It's not indicating that they're on the number line and they're non-negative or that they naturally occur, but instead, the correct answer is Arabic numerals for that one. Is there another question I might be able to help you with?
I think I figured it out as I was finishing my speech yesterday, but, the part on the outline where you can change up the parts, that's in the conclusion, is that correct?
Correct. And it has a parenthetical designation that says elements can be combined or reordered. And also at the end of our last classes lecture, we mentioned that we want to save the most impactful way to close the speech, thank you for last. But you can also switch around really those top 3 values of signaling the end is near, reinforcing the central idea, and review the main points. You can either squish them together and kind of freely type them as if they are just a past tense version of your thematic statement, or you can mix up the order in some of those things as well. Correct.
Thank you, that's all I have.
No
Professor.
problem. Any others for now? And I mean, any others from you? Any other questions from
Yeah,
our other
Professor.
classmates? Anyone? Go ahead.
So you said we should watch the video. Which of the videos? Because there's 2 midterm videos that's under announcement. There's the midterm exam review previously recorded, but then if you scroll down again, you see another midterm review stroke audience analysis lecture. Is that which of them do you want us to watch? Or should we watch
Um,
both of them?
You can watch both of them if you like, or if you just wanted to get right to it, you can go to the midterm exams slash audience analysis because that's our next unit that we'll study as well. So if you wanted to do, some students like to just hit it both times, but the information for the midterm review is identical in both of those videos. The only
Okay.
difference is that the video, of course, that says slash audience analysis also lectures that component as well.
Okay, and then you said the outline template. Do you mean like the outline video on here, or you mean like the templates in the file that should we watch the outline video?
Yes, you're welcome to watch that. It is not a mandatory thing because we did lecture that live in class as well.
Mm-hmm.
But that's just
Mm-hmm.
an artifact that goes through it a little more extensively because we went through it pretty quickly in our lecture. So that one spends a lot more time and precision if you'd like to watch that video. And you can also look at the content guide itself and the template in the file section. So if we've noticed you're kind of bombed with all of this information. It's a gang of stuff that is duplicated that has the same topic and feeling. And that's really just to give you all those resources as if we were sitting in class every day for 16 weeks. So you'd be able to access that amount of information in different platforms. So you're welcome to consume all of it. But if we were studying, like let's say that I was in a time crunch and I really needed to just, do well on the midterm really, really quickly, then I would probably watch the outlining video, look at the template and the content guide, and then study for that portion that way.
Okay, thank you.
No problem. All right, others for now, questions or comments? Anyone have anything? And remember, I believe that our midterm examination, where I'm so excited that we're getting this content and that we're going to study well, I believe it's worth 10% of our grade. All right, so even if you're not like a person that tests well, you should still be able to excel in this class because the majority is for the speeches that you yourself produce. All righty, so I want us to, our shoulders to be down a little bit, but also to do our very best. Questions or comments? Anyone have anything else before we transition a little bit to today's lecture pieces, which talk about reducing anxiety, listening, and ethics? Anyone have anything at all? All righty, fantastic. So remember that our textbook is sort of it's the book, it's the law, it's the rule of the class that says you already have your textbook. So, of course, you should read them. The chapters are very short. The book, even when purchased separately, is pretty economical at like 35 bucks. And it's a book that I keep. So, it's one that definitely we use as speech writers all the time. When we get through, or when we did get through with the crash course PowerPoint, that really facilitated chapters 1 and 2 of our textbook into a smaller space. And it just took us through the human communication behavior patterns, where we learned about the transactional model of communication, the 3 types of noises that impact it. We learned about the use of our schema and perception, about different meanings that words and phrases can have, and different levels that types of vocabulary that is used can have. Also, the symbolic nature of communication. And those are the same things that you find in chapters 1 and 2 of your textbook. Then we're also looking now at chapter 3, when we're discussing the concept of being anxious while being a speaker. And chapter 3 and I always have such big issues, because chapter 3 kind of comes in, the authors come in of chapter 3 with the assumption that we're all going to be nervous speakers, and that we're kind of buying into the mythos that people would rather have their teeth pulled than speak publicly, or that it is, a major debilitating force in our life and we just hate its guts and no one likes to speak publicly. Well, sometimes people like it, sometimes people dislike it. And even if we're anxious about it, unfortunately, some of us have to do it anyway. There's not a such thing as what we say a natural speaker or natural communicator, in a way that would segregate out that these people are natural communicators over here and these people have to work so hard at it just to make themselves become expressed correctly. Everyone is a natural communicator. I'm saying that we're all starting out with a base that, as human animals, we have the ability to communicate with ourselves, with our peers, and with the universe and with others. We have the ability to express ideas, even if we're nonverbal or non-vocal. So it's really just homing in on the right way that makes us feel confident when we do so. Makes us encourage what we call mutual intelligibility. And again, that's what sets us apart from a language class, whereas we learn one language and how to do it in a flowery or a proper way. In speech communication, our goal is just to get our meaning, or what we intended, to the other person, even if it kind of sounds raggedy or janky, or the other person has to ask twice. As long as we get that information over to them and they understand what we wanted to have been understood, then we have accomplished human speech communication, and our behavior is appropriate if our goal isn't really to impress these people with our words, or to say a word that no one in the audience understands, but rather to get our information intimated to another one person, which would be interpersonal communication, or to an audience, which would be the level of public speaking. So we have at least 2 people that are listening to us, then that would be an audience. When we reduce that speech anxiety, it's important that we know firstly of what it is that we have a level of anxiety towards, or what we're nervous about. Young people, I have anxiety every time it's time to launch class and I say, "Good morning, how are you doing?" Sometimes I'm going to talk to no faces. Sometimes I'll talk to all faces. Sometimes someone will leave their microphone on and I will hear you literally snoring in class as I'm speaking. And when we're in a face-to-face episode, you don't know who's going to laugh at your corny jokes. You don't know who's going to be bored, who's going to want to just get to the content and not have a rapport that's built up. So there's so many factors and indices of both success and failure that it is an anxiety driving premise, even if your job has been public speaking for years and years and years and years. We don't want to get rid of that anxiety. We just want to make sure to determine whether it's facilitative or debilitative. And when something is facilitative, when it helps to facilitate something, then it is helping to make it happen. So let's say that you have a level of anxiety or nerves that are kind of keeping you on point. So because you're nervous about this and you're worried about it, you made sure that you typed up your outline plenty in advance, that you've rehearsed it, that you've written out your index cards, that you have them numbered and in order to prevent anything from being, misspoken or misread. You're going to breathe on it. You made sure that you're hydrated before you came in to record your speech or to say it out loud. And then you're going to try to mock up a sunny disposition and get through it. One thing that helps me when we talk about getting through it anxiety wise to make sure that our anxiety facilitates some of our successes is to know that you have a finite beginning and ending. When we say that our speeches are 3 to 5 minutes long, or 90 seconds to 2 minutes long, or 4 minutes to 6 minutes for the persuasive speech, you know that there's a beginning, middle, and the end. And so even when you're rehearsing it, let's say that your speech is 4 to 6 minutes long, when you get to that 2 minutes and 5 seconds, you're like, all right, I'm on the road to success here. I'm almost done with this thing. Then there's some people like myself that are long-winded and are going to have to pack all of this gazillions worth of utterances and words that we have swimming in our brain into just 4 to 6 minutes. We can make sure that we create our outline, rehearse it. If it gets over time, do some editing, omit some things, take them out, reconstruct our outline, and try it again. So, a thing that can be helpful in anxiety is firstly knowing that everybody feels some level of anxiety, even if it's to help us along. And if it's debilitative, meaning that it hurts us, that we have a level of anxiety that causes us to quake or to develop hives or some sort of a tremor, or we think that our mouth is getting dry, or we feel like kind of like we want to rock through the whole thing, or we have wiggle hands, then those are okay normative movements that happen to us. We all have our tics, we all have things that we do as comfort habits to feel better about communicating to others, and that is perfectly and totally fine. We just need to identify, which our textbook mentions to us, our triggers are things that will upset us in an anxiety way that will convert any feelings of neutrality or facilitative anxious behaviors into something that's debilitative or maybe harmful to our schema, our psyche, and the production of our speech. Let's think about some triggers or some things that can make us a little wary and anxious. What is one of the most common things that we worry about when we are being a public speaker? We think about, I don't want to be the center of attention. I don't want all the eyes on me. I don't want everyone looking at me and staring at me and just waiting for me to mess up. Well, then that means that we kind of already have a premise that we think that people are out to get us, or we think that more people are, a little rougher on us than would be amenable to hearing what we have to say that are good things. I really wish that if it was safe to do so and that our structure was set up for this right now, that you could be in a face-to-face speech class. And I'm sure some of you are like, I'm so happy I don't have to walk in there and give a speech to real people. But there's just really nothing like that feeling when you get in there and you see the people, and you'll notice overwhelmingly over the 7,000 years that I've been teaching public speaking, so many students are happy to see one another at the lectern. They're genuinely interested in what it is that you have to say. They're giving approving head nods and they're touching their chin and, oh, what a good point. And then after the speech, they're raising hands to tell you how fantastically you performed and ask you some more questions about the cool thing that you just told us. So it's a very supportive environment that unfortunately cannot be mimicked when we do it asynchronously. But please understand that most of the people, and overwhelmingly most of the people, especially this people, will be rooting for you and wanting for you to do well. So I hope that it's not a point of interference or triggering for you that you think every time you get up to speak that people are going to have something negative to say or to think about it. So, firstly, we're a little anxious about being the center of attention, and we know that everyone will have to take a turn doing so. So, let's say that you are, I don't know, the instructional leader of the class that is the one that has to speak publicly every single day, and no one ever has to say anything unless they want to. That might be a little nerve wracking. But if you're a student in a public speaking class, or you're giving presentations at work, or doing something in your academic career, very likely there will be other people that are sharing that responsibility too, that it will be their turn to get up and speak, and you will be an audience. So the center of attention or that spotlight will move. It's your turn right now for this 3 to 5 minutes. But for the collective of the class, it'll be their turns collectively for the next hour and 20 minutes. You only have a very short premise for you just to be the one in the spotlight. Another thing that people are a little bit fearful of in public speaking, outside of being the center of attention, is forgetting what we're going to say, like totally blanking out on what it is that we were supposed to be presenting. The thing that helps us out, whether we are in an asynchronous class, a virtual on time class, or a face to face class, is that you are not called whatsoever to memorize your speech. So I had that good question before by email. Do we have to memorize it? You are not required. Not only are you not required to memorize the speech, you're not encouraged or invited to do so. Every semester that we've had a face-to-face class, there's somebody that is in the class that feels like a freestyle king, that person is going to just come in and just off the top, I'm just going to give the best speech. And we've already failed the assignment before we've begun. Because what we have to do, remember, is create a full sentence outline that is essentially a script. So a heavy part of the speech evaluation form, the critique in which I use to grade your outline and also your delivery, is seeing how faithfully you have come to what you have intended to say, which should be reflected in every word of your full sentence outline, which is written to display exactly the order that you will go in and saying these words, and then what it is that you've recorded on your video. If I don't have a document, an outline that shows me what you're supposed to say, then I can't make that critique of what you have actually said. So we already need to type something. We already need to make sure we have that document that's a full sentence outline template. Then, furthermore, the reason that we're not called to memorize the speech is because we want to see your interaction in real time with what we call extemporaneous speech. And extemporaneous speech means that we have a combination between something that is scripted and the real human value of what it is to perform in front of an audience. For instance, if we were in a face to face class or even the class that we have right now, so I've got my speech that I'm supposed to give. This is what we're doing for today's quiz. This is what we're talking about for the midterm exam. And then someone unmutes themselves and says, "Can you repeat that?" Or "Can I ask you a question about this?" And you're absolutely encouraged to do that. My whole job is to be able to receive that question, answer that thing, and then jump back into what it is that I was going to say about the midterm or whatever quiz that we're doing. So extemporaneous means, yes, you have planned out every word that you plan on saying, but we also have to be flexible enough in case a fire alarm goes off or someone laughs at one of the, funny comments or a joke that you make and you need to take an extra second to receive that laughter. If someone has a question, which they shouldn't interrupt you in this class to do so, but in your real life, you are going to have people that aren't even permitted or asked to be interruptive that will do that. So you're supposed to be giving a speech about this thing at work, and the boss interjects and says, "Can you move to page 4, please?" Okay, sure, page 4. And then you flip to page 4. All right, starting with sales projections on page 4. We see that there is a 25%. Okay, we've got that. Go to page 5. Like, okay, I had this whole thing rehearsed. I had my speech, but now they're asking a little more out of me. So extemporaneous means you kind of got to be flexible. And we know that if you as a speaker are called to be flexible, then the audience has got to be somewhat flexible too. Let's say that you want to prevent against blanking out on what you're going to say or losing your place. We can prevent out of that by typing a complete full sentence outline template, converting that template over to our index cards in a way that most benefits us. And when we say most benefits us, it depends on really which type of learner you are. As a person that's more of a recorder and a kinetic learner, it's important for me as an old to write out my index cards physically. So I'll type out my full sentence outline, then I'll grab my index cards and write all the words that I want to there. Now, I don't write all the ones and twos and all that stuff because they're my own index cards. And even if we were in a face to face class, you would never turn them in. They would be private and you would just use them to jog your memory. But you're welcome to write whatever that you like to. I even see student index cards that they've left on a lectern or put in the recycling bin that have vocal cues in them that say "get loud now" or "quiet down a little bit," or even pep talks. One student had a card that said "you're almost there, you're almost done." Okay, cool. So just something that is going to encourage yourself or that just writes out what it is that you want to remember of the speech, which for me is usually the entirety of the speech. Our general rule is to look up about once per index card. So if you have your index cards where you are jogging your memory, you would say, one cool thing about tacos is that you could essentially fill them with anything. Well, I don't believe in the concept of a sweet taco, and then you switch your index cards, but savory tacos are really all the rage in my house. So it's totally fine if you look down, jog your memory, look at your cards if you'd like to. In this virtual environment, we have people that are setting up like their whole outline or a whole piece of paper just kind of next to their machine. So it kind of looks like they're looking off just a little bit while they're talking, but we still don't see it. What we're trying to avoid is that your anxiety getting you to the way that you're speaking like over the paper just a little bit. "Good morning. How's everybody doing?" "Great. I just wanted to make sure that everybody likes tacos." And it's like, is there a person behind there or is an android just giving a speech? So we want to make sure that we know that lots of people are anxious. It can be facilitative, which means that it helps. It can be debilitative, which means that it hurts. But a lot of the things that we're worried about hurting us, such as forgetting what we're going to say or being the center of attention, people making fun of us, it's a lot of sort of thought before, but not really in action. If you lose your place, you can use my culture's universal symbol for give me a second. Just put that one finger up. Give me a second. Think about it. You need to get a water. Apologies, continuing. And so, no, you don't start over. No, you don't go all the way to the beginning. So, if you forget something, if your cards got disrupted, if you're in real time at the lectern, don't turn your back on us. Don't, try to start over. Just tell us you need just one moment. And you can put your finger up to do that, or you can say, 1 moment, please, and then go back to what it is that you're saying. We're rooting for you. We want you to do well. You want you to do well. And so, we're going to keep progressing. As we learned in our principle of communication that's continuous, you can't start over. You already said all that stuff. So now start from where you are and keep moving. We also know that speech anxiety can kind of get us when we're worried about how the audience will receive us. And that really goes towards our chapter, 5. So it's organized 3, 4, 5, with chapter 3 being anxiety, 4 talks about ethics, and 5 talks about listening, which really I would love for 3 and 5 to be more closely situated. But chapter 5 talks to us about listening, and it is imperative that we understand how our audience goes through the listening process. And that'll help us to be more anxious in positive ways, hopefully, and less anxious in other ways. Because when we understand listeners, there's a difference that we learn in chapter 5 between hearing and listening. So, hearing is a process that is physiological. And remember, on our very first class session, we learned that when something is physiological, or perhaps our second session, apologies, that when something is physiological, it's body based. And when something is psychological, it's just your brain being used. Hearing is just the opportunity of sound hitting your receptors that are audio receptors, so your ears. So, hearing is just a process of sound images entering the ear. But hearing is a psychological process that goes on in your brain that is understanding what it is that you've heard. So, listening means that understanding and processing power that goes on psychologically, and hearing is something that is physiological. Understand that's important to us if we're worried that at the lectern we're going to say the wrong word, or maybe we accidentally belch, or oh my goodness, what if we accidentally pass gas or drop our phone very loudly? Those are things that are physiological, but by the time that the audience goes through the psychological process of really picking apart exactly what that sound was, you've likely moved on to the other part of the outline gracefully and are going through something else. So that should help us to understand that, unlike when we can notice typos, let's say in an email or an essay, and a person can ruminate over those things and look over and over again at this mistake that you have made, we're not going to be able to hold on to that mistake that you've made for longer than that 90-second to 2 minute speech, or 4 to 6 minute speech. And you will have outweighed whatever that thing that you consider to be a mistake is so much more heavily with the good things that you've done in that speech. So, also listening tells us a little bit about the law of immediacy, which means that the way that you end the speech, or the impact that you've made towards the end of it, is going to sit with the audience far longer than the beginning. Students start out a little meek sometimes and timid. Good morning. How's everybody doing? Great. I'm so nervous today. Okay. Today we're going to talk about how to save a little bit of money by switching energy providers. And if there's one thing that we know is that Texas is hot, and hot as I mean, not hot as Texas, but what we know is that Texas is one of the hottest places you can be. So if you want to have a different type of hot summer that allows you at least to be cooler than school inside of your house, then I want to tell you a little bit about these energy plans. See, I've been working at this place that sells energy to people in retail spaces, and also I did a little more research for this project. So today I'm going to tell you how to switch your energy provider to save a lot more money this month, starting with this month that's coming up in June. Firstly, we're going to tell you about how Texas sells energy. Then I'm going to tell you a little bit about my company. And lastly, we're going to end with ways that we can find out how our hot girl summer won't ruin and melt all of our shoes. Here, let's get started. So you're going to feel it a little bit more as you get talking. Your anxiety is going to reduce. You're going to be a little more kinetic with your imaginary audience. It's going to flow a little bit better, and your audience isn't going to remember or care so much that you were nervous at the beginning. They were nervous at the beginning too. I'm nervous at the beginning of every class. So, tamping down our speech anxiety really just involves finding out what your personal triggers are. So, the book gives you, chapter 3 gives you some big triggers that are for everyone, that we're worried about being the center of attention. We're worried that we're going to mess up. We're worried that we're not going to say exactly what we intended on saying. But the only person that's going to know besides you precisely what you planned on saying is me. And I'm your biggest cheerleader. I'm going to think that what you said is fantastic and great and give you some positive comments on how to organize something differently if you felt like you made a misstep. But otherwise, your audience is just listening. They're not going to have a document or know exactly what it is that you planned on saying. And you're not required to memorize it. You got your notes right in front of you. You can number them if you're worried about them getting, misprepared or something. And we know that when we are an audience that's listening, we have far fewer moments to actually process what we perceive as a speaker as mistakes, as do, when we are writing something. Do you have any questions or comments about the concept of reducing anxiety when anxiety can help us, which is facilitative, versus when it hurts us, which is debilitative? The main triggers of speech anxiety, which include feeling as if we are the center of attention, thinking about if we're going to forget what we're going to say, or that mistake making, those types of imperatives, or how we can prevent out of those things by controlling for our full sentence outline, rehearsing our speeches, and making certain that we convert them over to index cards, also practicing that delivery. Questions or comments about anything that we've discussed so far in our anxiety chapter? Anyone have anything? All right, chapter 3 on anxiety also mentions to us, or ends with just kind of envisioning what happens. So and I've just phrased it a different way when we say it has a finite beginning and an end. If your speech is going to be 3 to 5 minutes long, then you can see it's going to start in 3, and by the end of 5 minutes, it'll be over. Some speech professors and practitioners encourage you to look in the mirror and give your speech. That never helps me out. I just find more freckles or, moles or zits or something. So giving a speech in a mirror never helps me out, but you can try it if you like to. What helps me is to rehearse it in front of an actual person or an animal like your dog. So my dog has like zero attention span, of course. So if I can kind of like catch her attention and come this way and that way with her, then, I know that we're rocking all right. But give a speech to, your little homie that's a kid, or to a family member, and just it can help you if you say your speech out loud and rehearse it to proofread, which flows correctly, or if there are any typos, grammatical or syntax errors. And also, you'll get sort of that first feeling of saying in front of the audience out of the way. Remember, we said that in our principles of speech communication that it cannot be duplicated. And so that means if you've already rehearsed it in front of at least one audience member, then you're not giving it to the audience for the first time when your speech is actually due. You're just speaking to another audience. All right. So you already did that. You already know what it is to give a speech in front of an audience. You're just switching up the audiences. Questions or comments about chapter 3, which centers reducing anxiety? Anyone have anything at all? All right. Thank you very much. Now, flipping into chapter 4, we talk a little bit about ethics. And ethics and rhetoric can also be discussed in a supplementary video that it is not required for you to, or 2 videos that are in the announcement section that are not requirements. If you do not watch these 2 videos, you can still perform very well in the midterm examination. One of them is called an open mind video, and the other one is a rhetoric video. And so it just talks really about improving the public discourse about ideas that are controversial, about expressing ourselves with things that matter to us, and making sure that we're not spreading misinformation or disinformation. So you're welcome to watch the videos in the announcement section that are the rhetoric video and the open mind video that are optional. This is your preference if you'd like to learn a little bit more about controversial topics and packaging information in ethical ways. But chapter 4 in your textbook really goes with the basics of ethics and making certain that we avoid plagiarization, that we are ethically sourcing information to avoid disinformation, controlling for the public speaker as a person who enhances what we call the public discourse. And the public discourse, means really the pantheon of ideas that are in the public. So things that people are talking about, gossiping about, wondering if they're true or not, conspiracies, the concept of real things that are actually happening. What is our position on this? How do we feel about this other thing? So, things that have entered the public sort of discussion space. A public speaker is poised, hopefully, to help that and not to hurt it, not to further muddle it by providing things that are lies or that are unethical. And chapter 4 also talks to us about those protections of speech that we have in the United States that sometimes are misunderstood or exploited. And we're going to get the guns for a couple of key terms that we want to remember towards those things. Firstly, when we get to chapter 4, we start talking about what a public speaker's sort of morals or duties are every time that we come up to the lectern or to a podium to give a speech. And we start off talking a little bit about how we're supposed to help instead of hurt, not that we're, taking, the same Hippocratic oath as a physician. But if you don't, maybe you've heard the adage before that someone says, if you don't have anything nice to say nothing at all. Now, it doesn't mean that a public speaker doesn't have to, a public speaker must say something nice all the time, but a public speaker is to be at their best understanding, telling the truth at all times. Now, let's say that I ask you, hey, good morning, what time is it? And you say, it's 11:17. And I say, oh, thanks. And then I look down and I say, oh, wait, it's actually 10:17. Now, maybe you did not intend to say something that was not true. But you did say that it was 11:17 and it's actually 10:17. What do y'all think? And I really hope that you participate in this because we have our discussion section, our second discussion that is already open that will be due, I believe, on the 30th that talks about ethics. So if you can put in the chat, please, I'm giving you a 15-second warning or to unmute yourself. If you say something that is untrue accidentally, is that thing still a lie? If I ask you what time it is and you say it's after 11 and it's actually just after 10, did you just tell a lie? What do y'all think? No? Yes? Okay, we've got a couple in the chat. We've already got one dichotomy. You got a binary, we got a yes on one side and a no, a yes. All right. Do we have anybody that says any other yeses, no's, or is it complicated? If you say something that's not true, regardless of intention, is it still a lie? And if you want to talk to us about it, you're welcome to unmute yourself. Yes, it's still a lie. All righty. What do you got? You're unmuting? Looks like Rachel's revving up. Are you doing it?
Yeah, I think yeah, it's complicated, but like the truth is the truth, and my ability to tell a lie is based on my knowledge of the truth. So if I'm telling what I know to be the truth, then I'm not lying, is what I think.
Got it. Okay, thank you. Now, what our public discourse says is that this public speaker has a duty to know. So you have a duty to know what the truth is before. So think about a person who, if I say, what time is it right now? And you're just taking more of a guess. Okay. And you can say, I think it's probably about 11. And you can frame that way. And you can say, I think it's about 11. And that kind of protects you from if it's actually 10 o'clock. And the person says, well, it's 10. Well, I said I thought it was like 11. I didn't say that I was certain with this. I was 100% sure. And if you cannot know, okay, then we absolutely should frame it that way. We need to kind of normalize the concept of saying, I don't know, I'm not sure, I don't know, you know what, my machine is probably like 2 minutes off anyway, so don't take my word for it, but this thing is happening. One thing that we need to separate out is what we learned about the denotative and connotative meaning of a word. So denotatively, when we say that something is a lie, the denotation is that it is a production of false information. When we look at the connotation of a lie, what Rachel has put forth to us and what many of us have as an internal sentiment is that if we did not intend to do this thing, if we didn't purposefully deceive someone, the connotation is that it's not our fault or we can't be blamed for this thing if we really thought this thing was true. Okay, so if we really thought this thing was true and we shared it anyway, then that thing isn't a lie. But from a public speaking perspective, as long as we have applied false information to an element of public discourse, it is technically a lie. Or you can call it something else if it's more comfortable. And we see that the media does this all the time. They will say it is falsely applied. It's a misapplication. It's out of context. It is something that is a misstatement. So they use all kind of these fluffy, euphemistic, idiomatic expressions to avoid saying this thing is a lie, because we have so ingrained in our society the connotation that in order for a lie to be a lie, there must be an intent to deceive. And we don't have that in public speaking. That's maybe a legalistic, definition that can be applied some ways. But in public speaking, as long as you said it and it wasn't true, then your audience is going to take it as a moment of deception and kind of a gotcha moment. Have you ever heard that term before when someone says, you said that it was 4 out of 5, but that slide said it was actually 4.3 out of 5. And that is a statistical difference. You're like, you're right. I was rounding down since it was a 3. Yes, but it's 4.3. I really need you to do better. Like, oh, okay. I didn't know that we're being that stank with the decimals this morning. So we are, as public speakers, at all costs trying to be really on point with telling as much of the truth as we know is true as many times as possible. Because the second that we step out of that box of truth, they're trying to massage it with context, and someone's going to pounce on us, and it's going to reduce our ethos, our credibility. And once that thing is broken, then the audience has a very difficult time trusting anything else that we say after that, especially if they determine that we have arrived at a misstatement, something that is false in a way that is purposefully deceptive, which would be some of our connotative definition of a lie, or even that we have erred or provided erroneous information in a way that is lazy or unkempt. So we had a duty to know what this thing is. And instead of researching it or just finding out about it, we just said this really archaic or old information or said something that wasn't true as like a shortcut. So we've taken a shortcut, not researched this thing, and then had, the provenance of false information. We want to make certain that we understand, as briefly touched upon earlier, the legalistic portion of it. Sometimes you hear people say, this is the United States, we have freedom of speech. So even if I want to walk down the street just telling lies to everyone, I can do that. And you know what? That statement is sort of right with an asterisk. Yep, if you are not set up to give a public speech that carries with it funding and a podium, there is no duty to not lie. Is there anyone in here that knows a liar? Like, I know a liar. I know a person who lies just because it's Monday at 2. They don't have to be provoked into it. They will just make something up out of the planet. Whole story narrative just made up. And so some people just naturally are storytellers. They just tell lies and they just say things that are not true. And there does not have to be any sort of consequence for that person that is governmentally driven or that prosecutes them in any way for telling these lies, as long as they do not hurt the other person's reputation. It doesn't hurt the other person's ability to earn a living. It doesn't hurt that other person's sort of schema, psyche, or invoke any sort of bodily harm or psychological harm against another person. So that person who's just walking up and down the street telling lies, they're not bothering anybody. They're just lying to themselves even about stuff. Okay, whatever. But let's say that in your capacity as an employee at this job, you have told a lie, or that you have created some speech that has made a hostile environment for the rest of the employees, that you have disengaged the civility or humanity of others, that you have done things that have hurt the companies or stole some insider secrets, traded them improperly. All of those things are speech acts, and you can be fired for all of those things. What our freedom of speech, or what our First Amendment to the Constitution, which gives us freedom of redress against public grievances, assembly, the concept of protection against prior restraint, the practicing of religion, those things that are protected by our First Amendment, means that there is not a governmental agency that can prevent you from doing these things in advance, that can prevent you from printing those thoughts, that can prevent you from saying these things out loud on Sunday at 4 in the parking lot. That does not mean that they will not carry with them privatized consequences or differences in ordination. For instance, let's say that the United States government believes that you say something that is going to be called, or excuse me, that is what is going to be classified as your textbook includes as incitement. So when incitement happens, that means that we can even use the old school term of fighting words. So there is some sort of speech act that has been created that allows another person to believe that physical danger is impending. And so they may either decide to strike first, or they may run, let's say, and injure themselves. Maybe you've heard this idiomatic, euphemistic expression of someone yelling fire in a movie theater. So if you go into the movie theater and you yell, fire, fire, there's a fire, everyone run. And there is not really a fire. And in this case, it doesn't matter even whether you believe it's a fire. If there is not actually a fire, you do not have a proactive, defense against this. And you can absolutely be arrested and you can be charged for yelling fire in a movie theater if it caused someone to run and even put themselves in danger of hurting themselves, not even actually someone gets hurt. So that's called incitement. The same thing as if, let's say, there is a slur that is so inflammatory that when someone says it to you, you can have the anticipation that physical violence will ensue. If you decide to strike first and you say, this person said this thing to me and I thought I was in bodily danger, so I, gave my own self defense, then that is something that also the government will take into consideration when we are inside of court and we figure out, was it reasonable for this person to believe that they were in some sort of issue? Other forms of speech that are not protected, you hear in the news very often when people say that's against HIPAA, and HIPAA is its own thing, and it talks about protections against someone, let's say, giving medical information that is a provider or practitioner to a lay person or to your boss or to other people. If I say, "Oh, I heard that Sarah Rose stubbed her toe when she was walking out of the room," that's not a violation of her HIPAA. I'm not her medical practitioner. I don't know even if this thing is true. It's not protected information. If she shared it with me, then she has anticipation that it can be shared with the class unless it's been private. As I'm not a provider and she's not my patient, it's not a HIPAA violation. In speech communication and education, we have FERPA, which talks to us about not sharing student records. So let's say if you're a dual credit student, even if you're 16 years old, I can't tell your parents what your grades are. I can't tell them if you're enrolled. I can't tell them anything. That's a privatization of information that has a governmental ordinance to save it. So this means you can't say, well, I looked through this person's medical records and I read them out loud in front of the crowd, because that is not protected. There's already a law in place to make sure that doesn't happen from a practitioner to a patient level. So there is an expectation of privacy, and that would be a violation if it was sourced incorrectly, meaning that you've received this not from this person with the permission to express it, but you've been digging through their trash to get it, or that you found it some other illicit way. Same thing with if we're talking about school records. Back in the days of the dinosaurs, when our parents and grandparents were doing stuff, they would just put the student's name and their grade right on the door. And we don't do that anymore to make sure that everybody's, psyche is taken care of and their schema is okay. So know that we're not supposed to share those things as well. And so it kind of hurts feelings sometimes when you know that you and your brother are in the same class, or you and your friend, and you say, well, can I just bring, him his paper? I can't. I have to give it to him. I can't give it to anyone else. So our freedom of speech does not in any way control for places such as Texas, which is an at-will state that can fire us for just anything on the planet, however it is that we show up to work, or what we feel, or what we do. But we have to be careful to understand that if the government is funding whatever this thing is that is we're controlling for, that we're speaking, if they are trying to restrain, or they're trying to prevent you from printing, or prevent you from speaking something that is opinion based and does not fall into the criteria of immediate danger to another person, incitement, reputational, defamational damage are those things that are listed in our bullet points in chapter 4, then you should be able to say what it is that you want to say. That means that you have freedom from redress for the government, not from private entities. So that means if you said this really offensive piece of communication and this slur, then the government says, all right, be easy. You're talking slick, but I hear you. That doesn't mean that somebody in the parking lot isn't going to have a problem with you, or that people aren't going to want to do business with you, or that you're not going to catch hands in the parking lot. Oh, apologies. Our classroom rule is if we see a pet or a baby, we have to know its name. All right. So who is this dog that's with us today?
This is Maya.
Hi, Maya. What's up,
She
Maya?
is she wants to bark at the neighbors. She wants to go outside.
Okay, Maya's got feelings. And you know what? That's her freedom. Maya's got freedom of speech. Maya can go out there and bark at anybody. And I wish the government would come and say something to Maya about it. All right, so we know that. All right, thanks for complying with that, because it's very important that we knew that Maya was in college today. All righty, so we have to understand that we can say anything we want, but our boss can still have feelings about it and fire us. Our partners can still have feelings about it. We can say things that aren't ethical. We can tell lies. We can use slurs. We can use offensive communication, but not all of it is protected. So those slurs that we just talked about, that the government can agree with whomever the plaintiff is and say, yeah, this thing is so inflammatory. If you look right at this person and you say, in 2 seconds, I'm coming out with a knife, I'm going to stab you and everybody that looks like you, it's about to be a hate crime in here, and you decide to punch the person first, the government is going to definitely take that as a moment of defense for you, and is going to take that as an affirmative defense in a way that you felt like you were in danger. It is not that it's protected, that because you said that, that speech act is protected and cannot be used to prosecute you, because it absolutely can if you just told everybody you were going to stab everybody in this place. When we look at that type of speech, when we use offensive communication against classes of people that have been discriminated against, that organize us into categories such as a person's perceived race, perceived ethnicity, perceived nationalism, or use of language, their perceived age, even their skin color, the concept of their gender, gender expression, pronoun use, or sexual orientation. Slurs that are against those types of categories are classified as, and I'm giving you the guns for this, hate speech. All right. So, hate speech is a key term that we need to get out of our chapter 4, which is on ethics. We want to make sure we do a quick internal recap where we're discussing that there is a such thing as freedom of speech, but that largely means a prior restraint against speech that is undesirable by the government. And it does not mean that you may say anything that you would like and that your boss or your friends or your school can't have its own speech codes. Doesn't mean you can steal people's information. It doesn't mean that you can reveal private things that would hurt a person's livelihood or would spur them to think that their bodily harm is impending. So, firstly, we learned about the First Amendment and what freedom of speech really means to us in the United States. Now we're on to hate speech, which definitionally talks to us about slurs or offensive communication that is usually launched by a speaker that targets the group affiliations or categories that a person belongs, or to which a person belongs. For example, when we get to you people, well, you people always come over here and you do this. Well, you people look like that. Well, you know, those people, they always leave trash everywhere. Like, excuse me. Well, yeah, I'm talking about toddlers. Okay, I guess. But when you say something that you know is inflammatory, and this is really the caveat for hate speech, how do we know this thing is hate speech? What's sort of our common sense test as an audience member? Firstly, is it targeting one of those groups that we just discussed? So has this person said something that is very, very offensive to the degree of what we consider to be a slur, something that's ugly, negative? We know full good and well when we hear it, the persons that are supposed to come into the minds of the audience. And this thing is a really, really ugly, hateful thing. So there's no such thing as good hate speech or kind hate speech. It's got hate in the word. So first of all, it's a really negative thing, and it's against a group of people. And then the speaker should likely know. So this is something that we would think in the big 2022 that someone who should have no way to plausibly deny that they understood that this thing was a slur. So if someone says, "Oh, I didn't know that was offensive." You didn't know that that was offensive. People have been saying that for the past 30 years in a row, right before they hang people from trees, and you had no idea this thing was offensive. No, sorry, I thought it was cool because my friend gave me a pass. Okay, got it. So this is something that the speaker very likely, or you consider as an audience member, has a duty to know that this thing is ugly and offensive and a slur. And we also have, so what we've said is that it's always negative, it's against a group of people, and the speaker has a duty or very likely knows this thing is hateful. So really just those three. We'll stay with those three caveats for hate speech. Now we have a partner to hate speech, as hate speech is defined for us in chapter 4, that is really only available here in lecture because it's embedded in our book in kind of a weird place and not even boldface. So here I'm giving you the term with the guns, a trigger word. Just 1 second, let me make sure that I get in the chat. All right, so you've noticed, oh, excuse me, it has two G's, apologies, trigger. Now I'm going to put 3 R's in it. This is what this day is. Okay. Here we go. All right, so it's a trigger word, TRIGGER. And you probably notice when we say hate speech, if somebody were to come into our classroom and say some horribly negative, offensive, slur type of word, then our audience will very likely be triggered by that. Either people that are hate mongers will be like, yeah, somebody finally said it. Or people will be like, oh my gosh, I can't believe you just said that thing out loud. Or people will be insulted because we're talking about them or their family members. Or people will be off put and insulted, even if they don't know anyone from that group of people that's just been talked down about that. That's a really ugly thing to say. So it really kind of characterizes the speaker as a bad person when you say something that is a piece of hate speech. So, in this essence, hate speech are types of triggers, but trigger words are really just anything that makes the audience, even just one audience member, feel a certain way. And we say feel a certain way, we're thinking about an emotionality that wasn't there before that word. So, think about the concept of hate speech. When somebody says something horrible and negative, we have our criteria. We know that it's a slur, it's something that targets a person's group affiliations, and it is something that the speaker should very well know and on purpose has deployed because they already know this thing is inflammatory. But a trigger word doesn't always have to be hate speech. It can even be positive. So, our caveats for trigger words are that, yes, like hate speech, it will incite the audience's emotion. However, it can be something that targets even an individual thing or not even a person at all. It can just be about a thing. So, think about the trigger that is the word free. Have you ever heard someone get excited, or maybe you got excited because you heard that something was happening free? Well, it's free. Okay, well, I better participate in it. I'm in Spring Branch campus, and this was like right before we shut down for the pandemic, probably like that February. And there's a bunch of students standing in the line before the Eagle Room, and I see a couple of my students in there, and I say, "Hey, what are y'all in line for?" And the young lady says, "I don't know. They're giving out something free." And I'm like, "What is it?" She's like, "I don't know." I'm like, what if it's butt whippings or like, like nasty water or something? She's like, well, it's free. So some people just hear the word free and they're like, I'm in line, I'm getting it, I'm doing it. Think about other things that are triggers. People say immigration, people start splitting automatically. This again. Or, okay, someone's finally talking about this thing. Abortion, people start picking sides. This is how I feel about it, or this is how I feel about it over here. Pineapple on pizza, big trigger. Some people are like, yes, it's fantastic and great. Some of us hate its guts. So there can even be one same word that some people in the audience think this is a positive and good thing. I can't wait, or I have these positive feelings towards it. And then some people can hear that exact same word and have negative feelings. So this means that the speaker is not always going to know that this thing even is a trigger, much less that the audience feels positively about it or negatively about it. So this means that when a trigger word happens at the lectern, the speaker is not trying to be hateful necessarily, unless it's a piece of hate speech, but maybe just said something that they thought was cool or fun, and now they don't realize that the audience has feelings about it. Let's get an example that's kind of cheeky, but let's see how you feel about it. There is a word, and this is another point if you can unmute yourself or put it in the chat. I've told a lie. I'm going to go a different way because I'm worried about the words that would end up in the chat. Let me do it this way. There is a word that students report all the time that they dislike that is a trigger to them. And I don't know exactly why, but I have to just roll with them with it. I've put it in the chat. If you have the ability to look in the chat, tell me if you agree or disagree that this is a trigger or a word that you dislike. All right, so a word that you dislike. And the word is moist, Moist. And I have so many students that are like, oh, that one bothers me. I cannot stand that word. I'm like, why? What if you're talking about, a chocolate cake recipe and you want to make sure it's not all dried out? Like, no, just use another word. I don't like that one. All right, yeah. So some people too that dislike that word. And so just think about it. If you're giving a speech about chocolate cake and you're at the lectern and you say the word moist 17 times in your speech, people's eyes are going to be twitching and they're going to be upset. And you're ignorant. You had no idea that this was a trigger for people. You're just giving your chocolate cake recipe and people are cringe and the whole audience like, oh my God, when is it going to be over? I cannot, oh, please let this be done. Same thing for a word like bacon. To me, bacon is the candy of the meat community. It's delicious. And then some people, bacon is repulsive. They would never eat it. They don't want to hear about it. Negative. No, thank you. All right. So we say it's fine. Ms. Silva says it's fine as long as it's got a problematic associate with other people that they know. It can happen. So triggers don't always have to be negative. Sometimes the speaker knows and can trigger you on purpose and can say, all right, today I'm going to teach you how to save $500 by the end of the year. I'm like, I am in, I'm listening. Stop buying coffee. Now you lost me. Never mind. Okay, so that's it. I was triggered. I was interested. Now I'm not going to be able to do it. Alrighty, questions or comments about what we learned so far in the ethics chapter about our protections of the First Amendment affords and what it does not cover, hate speech, and trigger words, which are given not in the chapter, but by guns here in the lectern. Anyone have any questions or comments about our first imperatives of chapter 4? Alrighty, and then we move into a conversation about avoiding plagiarization. We learned that trademarking and copywriting is a thing. When we have something that's protected property, that's intellectual, words or phrases, catchphrases that don't belong to you, such as if you're going to get up to the lectern and say, "But up, ba, I'm loving it," or "Let's get ready to rumble." You can do that in a classroom because we're a not-for-profit organization, so we're not selling anything, but you're not supposed to create a t-shirt that says that and sell it at the flea market because those words actually belong to someone else. So they have made a service mark, a trademark, or copyright on these things. So we want to acknowledge that that is someone else's intellectual property. And then we need to receive what we call licensing or permission to use those things. In an academic setting, if you want to give a quote that I could not find an attribution for, even though I got a really good question and I found out that the reply was still in the draft, so apologies. But if we find that this quote was Ben Franklin's attributed quote or Franklin Delano Roosevelt or someone else's quote, then you can do your very best with it. And you can say, this quote is attributed to this person, and then give the website or the reference that says that this person had said this thing. Or if you can find that primary document or, some place where this person is quoted and saying this thing, then you can say it as long as you cite it, meaning that you say, I received this from this place, or according to President John F. Kennedy from Rice University in 1962, he says, quote, "We choose to go to the moon," end quote. And then you continue on to whatever it is that you're saying. So you can say these things, you can borrow someone else's information and property as long as you're not getting paid for it. But once it turns into something commercial, then you need to acknowledge your source and request use to use it. So back in the day, y'all, the Rockets are really good. And I'm not talking about Super Traveling Harden was here. I'm talking way, way, way back in the day when the Rockets won a championship, and then we won another championship. And by the time we got to the playoffs in what would have been our third season, our third trip there, our newspaper, we had two newspapers in the city at the time. The Houston Post ran a headline that said, "Rockets, comma, three-peat, question mark." And immediately they got a cease and desist letter and had to stop printing that version of the paper because someone owned the term three-peat. And that person was Pat Riley, and that person was a basketball guy that was dynastic in his purchases and in his running of things, and they had to run a different headline because someone actually owned that phrase. And then moving forward, Lil Wayne tries to make on a mixtape a song called Three Peat. He has to use the number 3 and the letters PAT to do so, to avoid that exact same licensing. So we can borrow things, we can buy things, but words are important, and words can belong to certain people. So we have to be careful to avoid plagiarization by always citing and acknowledging our sources, and especially doing a check to make sure that no one owns this phrase outright. Questions or comments about what we learned in chapter 4 in its entirety, including ethics? Does anyone have anything at all before we move briefly to chapter 5, which really contains just one imperative that we need to be mindful of that talks to us about listening? Questions or comments about anything at all?
I have something. So I think your comment was about the Ben Franklin thing was in reference to my email. So in that situation, like it's kind of like one of those internet quotes where they're just saying like a famous person said this, or that's what it seemed like to me. In that situation, would you have gone ahead and given Ben Franklin credit, or would it suffice to say it was anonymous?
You would say instead of anonymous, since it does seem overwhelmingly that people believe that it was Ben Franklin, or that's how it's been treated historically, I use the term attributed to Ben Franklin. So we're not going to say anonymous, because as soon as you say it's an anonymous quote, someone's going to say, "I thought that was Ben Franklin." So what you're going to say in advance is, people think it's Ben Franklin. So when something is attributed to someone, it means that our society treats it as if it belongs to them, even if we're not certain exactly.
Got it. Thank you.
Yep, so you could do that. And since this first one didn't require any references, like you would absolutely not have lost any points if you said that it was Ben Franklin outright, or you said it was anonymous, but just in our real life when we're speaking, you can always say attributed to this person. All right, good. Excellent question, and very relevant to this chapter. Questions or comments or anything else about chapter 4? All right, chapter 5 is about listening, and we really covered the most basic imperative And we gave the guns for this, that we learn in our listening chapter there is a difference between hearing itself and listening. That, remember, hearing is the physiological process of sound entering the audio receptors, and listening is the psychological process of going over that information and extracting meaning from it. So hearing is physiological and listening is psychological. So when someone says, okay, you're hearing me, but are you listening? Then that's important, and it shouldn't be backwards. It's not, okay, you're listening, but I want you to hear me. It sounds like it's more final just based on the phonetics of the word or how it flows, but it's really the opposite. So yeah, you may hear it. You may have the sound entering your ear, but are you actually processing it, making sense? Did you listen to what it is that I had to say? And when we understand that we are trying to go for active listening amongst our audience, it means that we're trying to involve sort of vocal, what we call paralanguage. And paralanguage to us talks about the way that we say something. So you've probably heard this before, that there is what is said. Did you have a question? I'm sorry.
But
Okay.
in the textbook it says listening is a conscious act.
Correct. And that means that your brain has to be involved. It's psychological.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am. So listening is psychological. Your conscious has to be used in it. But hearing is just the sound entering the ears. Does that help?
Yes, it helps.
All right, thank you. One second. I'm just making sure that we have this definition in the chat as well. Okay, so in the chat, I'm just giving a quick definition of paralanguage, and that prefix para means to help, like a paraprofessional or a paralegal. And then, of course, language means language, so words, the concept of linguistics. And we are dealing with paralanguage. We're talking about the pitch, rate, tone, speed, volume, so how it is we say something. So there's two levels. There's what you say, and then there's how you say it. So I could say, all right, y'all, have a good day. Or I could say, all right, y'all, have a good day. Are you having fun at this party? Yes, it's the time of my life. I'm having a blast. I cannot wait to spend 4 more hours at this party. Are you having a good time? Yeah, I'm having the time of my life. It is a blast. I can't wait to spend 4 more hours at this party. So you can say exactly the same thing, but the way that you say it with your voice, meaning the sounds that come out of it, can change whether your audience receives it a certain way, whether they believe you, whether they are in tune with what it is that you're saying, or you're kind of sounding like broken up or monotonous. If your accenture is fantastic and great, and we love to hear that you're marketable and that you're so smart because you're bilingual or trilingual, that's going to be attractive to audiences. We're going to like to hear those concepts. If you sound like us, meaning that you have this exact same accent from Boston like I'm from, that's great. We're going to be attracted to that as well. So think about how we say things and how that can encourage the concept of active listening. And also think about how listening will change whether the audience considers itself to be captive or volunteer. So if we are a captive audience, it means we have to be here. So we're either getting a grade to be here, or our boss says that we have to be here, or our mom says we have to sit through this lecture on putting $7 worth of gas in the car. Or if you feel like we're a voluntary audience, then we have a little more ease in our brains. Our conscious is kind of, lifted a little bit to where we can be like, okay, since I'm choosing to be here, I can choose which parts to consume. But if it's captive, if I must be here or the world's going to fall apart, that I'm not going to be paying as good of attention. I'm going to feel a little like I'm forced to listen to whatever it is that we're listening to. Questions or comments about anything that we have discussed? Absolutely anything at all that we've discussed on this day with listening. As our recap is just knowing the difference between hearing and listening, that hearing is physiological and listening is psychological. And then the concept of, excuse me, I want to share the screen 1 second. And then the concept of knowing the difference between a captive and a voluntary audience. Questions or comments about anything we discussed? Alrighty, as we get ready to get out of here, please know that thanks to, go ahead.
Professor, you said the concept of what?
A captive audience versus a voluntary audience. So an audience is captive, meaning they feel like they have to be there. They're not going to listen as actively usually, because they're going to be a little dissuaded or upset that they have to sit through whatever this talk is. But if they volunteer to listen to you, or to volunteer to listen to what you're doing, and they're not made to, then they likely will have a little more intuition towards what it is you're saying and interest.
Okay, thank you.
No problem. Others, questions or comments? All right. Before we stop the recording and get you out of here, I want to show you a couple of things. All right. So I believe it was Natasha that mentioned to us that we have a recording in the announcement section that includes both the lecture that is your midterm exam review and also reviews your audience analysis chapter. I want to show you, since audience analysis is our next unit, and we do have that lecture for audience analysis that is connected to your midterm exam lecture in the announcement section. I just want to show you in the file section where there's also a handout for the audience analysis that goes painstakingly through every imperative that you need to know for audience analysis in general, which is chapter 6 of your textbook, and also is helpful to you for your quiz that will come the day after the midterm. And I know this is all going fast, but it's all going fast because it's a 3-week mini term, so it's all squished up. So we have your audience analysis study guide, which selects out for you all of the imperatives that are important to you to study for your quiz that is on audience analysis. So you have this handout and you have chapter 6 itself to study for those things. Remember, you have now 2 videos that control for an exact telling of your midterm exam review. And inside of the file section, you have the midterm exam review itself in paper form or in print form. So where it says midterm review 1 and 2, it's really just a front and back page of a scan. So apologies that it's kind of wonky, but it's there. So these are all of the things that you will need to know. And it was, since it was a paper copy, it was a print out. So you could write next to it or you could download or, write over it if you like to. But this reminds us of everything to study from the crash course PowerPoint on this first page. And then where it says midterm review 2, which is technically the back page of the handout, it tells you to study the following items from your textbook and your lecture notes. And if it says lecture notes, then it can include videos if you want to watch those. And it reminds you to study all parts and functions of the full sentence outline template. And you can do that through the content guide and the blank template itself that's in the files section of Canvas. I will make certain, since we had a discrepancy with this quiz today, remember extra hours have been added to the quiz since it was not open at midnight. So you'll now have until either 3 or 4 in the morning to take our quiz that is due on this day, the 24th. And your midterm exam, I will check right now to make sure that it will be available at midnight. Questions or comments before you dismiss? And your informative grades are pending. So we'll start those this afternoon. Questions or comments? Anyone have anything at all?
Yes, I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
So for the midterm, we will need to study chapter 6 too, or no?
No, you don't have to
Okay.
study chapter 6 too. It's just attached. It's the unit after the midterm. So you will need to study the crash course PowerPoint and chapters 3, 4, and 5, which you just covered today, and the outlining process.
Okay, thank you so much.
Very welcome, no problem. All righty, questions or comments? All right, thank y'all so much for coming to class. I'm stopping the recording. You'll get an announcement with those chapters over again for the midterm. All righty, y'all take care. Have a good day.
Thank you. Thank you,
You
Professor.